In the small countryside town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow and steady pace. Rolling hills stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with farms that had been passed down through generations. Among these was a modest farm owned by a woman who preferred to keep to herself. Her name wasn't important to most people in town, she was just the farmer. But what they didn't know about her would have shocked them. This woman, Dr. Evelyn Carter, had once led a life far removed from the quiet existence she now lived. Before settling into farming, she had spent decades serving her country in ways few could imagine. She was one of the first black women to rise through the ranks of the U.S. military's elite Delta Force, an accomplishment that earned her respect and enemies around the world. After years of risking her life on dangerous missions, she decided it was time to step away from the chaos and find peace. And so, she bought this farm, hoping to leave her past behind. Every morning, Evelyn woke up before sunrise. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of soil and grass. She'd sip her coffee while watching the sunrise over her fields, feeling grateful for the simplicity of her new life. By day, she worked tirelessly, planting corn, feeding her chickens, and fixing fences. In the evenings, she often sat by the fireplace reading books or sketching plans for expanding her vegetable garden. To anyone passing by, she seemed like any other hard-working farmer, but those who looked closer might notice something different about her, the way she carried herself, calm yet alert, as if always ready for anything. What no one in Willow Creek realized was that Evelyn hadn't completely left her old life behind. Sure, she traded combat boots for work boots, but the skills she learned in the military never faded. Every sound outside her window, a rustling leaf, a snapping twig, was processed instantly in her mind. Every shadow caught her attention. It wasn't paranoia, it was training. Years of facing danger had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts were telling her something wasn't right. For weeks, Evelyn had noticed strange things happening around her property. A broken fence post that hadn't been there the day before. Footprints near the edge of her land that didn't belong to her or her neighbors. Even the local wildlife seemed quieter than usual, as if sensing trouble brewing. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, maybe even her own imagination playing tricks on her. But then came the night when everything changed. It started with a faint noise, a soft crunch of gravel beneath tires. Evelyn was sitting in her living room, flipping through a book, when she heard it. Most people wouldn't have thought twice about such a minor sound, but not Evelyn. She paused, setting the book aside and listening intently. Another crunch followed, closer this time, then silence. Whoever, or whatever it was, they were being careful. Too careful. Evelyn rose from her chair and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The darkness swallowed everything, making it impossible to see clearly. Still, she knew someone was out there. Her heart rate stayed steady. No panic, no fear. Instead, a familiar calm washed over her, the kind that came from years of preparation. This wasn't the first time she'd faced danger, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. She moved quietly through the house, checking each room and securing windows. In the corner of her kitchen, leaning against the wall, was a baseball bat. She picked it up, gripping it firmly. If whoever was out there thought they could catch her off guard, they were dead wrong. Evelyn may have chosen a peaceful life, but she hadn't forgotten how to fight. And tonight, she was prepared to remind anyone who crossed her of that fact. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew thicker. Finally, the sound of footsteps approached her back door. They were clumsy, untrained, and confident. Too confident. These weren't professionals, just amateurs looking for an easy target. Little did they know they were about to meet their match. The back door burst open with a loud crash, shattering the stillness of the night. 5 figures rushed into Evelyn's house, their faces hidden beneath hoods and masks. They carried flashlights that cut through the darkness like knives, casting long shadows across the walls. One of them held a crowbar, its metal glinting faintly in the dim light. Another clutched a bag, ready to fill it with whatever valuables they could grab. Their movements were clumsy, uncoordinated, Clearly not professionals, but they made up for it with sheer aggression. "Where is she?" One of them barked, his voice rough and demanding. Evelyn stood perfectly still in the corner of the room, just out of sight. She had positioned herself strategically, using the furniture as cover. Her grip tightened on the baseball bat, her knuckles white against the wood. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she almost felt amused by their bravado. These men thought they were dealing with an ordinary woman living alone on a farm. What they didn't realize was that they were walking into a trap set by someone who had faced far worse than them. One of the intruders stepped forward, sweeping his flashlight around the room. "Hey!" he shouted, spotting the book Evelyn had left on the table. "She was here, look at this, she probably ran off." "She ain't running nowhere," another snapped back. "This place is surrounded, let's check upstairs." As two of them started heading toward the staircase, Evelyn acted. Moving quickly and silently, she slipped behind the man closest to her. Before he could react, she swung the baseball bat with precision, striking him hard on the side of the knee. He let out a yelp of pain and crumpled to the floor, dropping his flashlight. The sudden noise startled the others, sending them scrambling for cover. "What the hell was that?" one of them yelled, spinning around wildly. His flashlight beam darted across the room, searching for the source of the commotion. Evelyn didn't wait for them to regroup. She lunged forward, grabbing the fallen flashlight and shining it directly into the eyes of the nearest intruder. Temporarily blinded, he stumbled backward, tripping over a chair and landing flat on his back. Without hesitation, Evelyn brought the bat down again, this time tapping him lightly on the wrist. He cried out, releasing his weapon, a heavy wrench, as if it burned his hand. By now, the remaining three men had realized something was very wrong. Instead of finding an easy target, they were facing someone who seemed to anticipate their every move. Panic began to creep into their voices. "Who's there? Show yourself," one of them demanded, trying to sound tough despite the tremor in his tone. Evelyn stepped into the light, holding the baseball bat casually at her side. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as though she were greeting guests rather than confronting armed intruders. "You boys look lost," she said, her voice smooth and steady. "This isn't your property." The leader of the group, the one who had kicked open the door, stared at her in disbelief. What are you doing?" he stammered. "We're taking what we want." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying him as if sizing him up. Then, without warning, she moved. In one fluid motion, she closed the distance between them and drove the end of the bat into his stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air, while the other two scrambled to retreat. But Evelyn was faster. She pivoted, swinging the bat low to sweep one man off his feet before turning her attention to the last one standing. He raised his hands defensively, backing away toward the door. Wait, he pleaded. "Don't hurt me." "Oh, don't worry," Evelyn replied coolly. "I'm not going to hurt you. Much." With that, she delivered a swift strike to his ankle, causing him to collapse. In pain, within moments all 5 men were incapacitated, groaning and writhing on the floor. For a brief moment, silence settled over the room. Evelyn stood amidst the chaos, breathing evenly, her posture relaxed. She glanced down at the men, shaking, her head slightly. "I warned you," she murmured under her breath. But the fight wasn't over yet. As much as Evelyn wanted to call the police and let them handle the rest, something about these men bothered her. They weren't acting like typical burglars. Their behavior suggested they knew exactly where they were and why they were here. That meant this wasn't random. Someone had sent them. Evelyn crouched beside the leader, gripping his collar and pulling him upright. His face was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Who sent you?" she asked, her voice low but firm. When he didn't answer, she pressed harder. "Listen carefully. You're trespassing on private property, and I've already shown you what happens when people mess with me. Now tell me who sent you." The man hesitated, clearly torn between fear of Evelyn and loyalty to whoever had hired him. Finally, he muttered, "We were told it'd be easy. Just some old lady." Evelyn frowned. This wasn't enough. information. Whoever was behind this attack had underestimated her badly, and that meant they might try again. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Steeling herself, Evelyn dragged the men one by one into her barn, tying them securely with rope she kept for emergencies. She made sure they were comfortable enough, not because she cared about their comfort, but because she didn't want them passing out or causing unnecessary trouble. Once they were secured, she returned to the house to assess the damage. To her relief, nothing appeared to be stolen or broken beyond repair. The intruders hadn't even managed to search the entire house before she stopped them. Still, this incident left her uneasy. If these men were part of a larger operation, she couldn't afford to ignore it. Not only did she need to protect herself, but she also had a responsibility to ensure her neighbors stayed safe. As dawn approached, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea and staring out the window. Her mind raced with possibilities. Should she report the incident to local authorities? Or should she dig deeper using the skills she'd honed during her time in Delta Force to uncover the truth? In the end, there was no real choice. Evelyn had always been a problem solver, someone who took matters into her own hands when necessary. And this situation called for more than just calling the cops. It called for action, with a determined gleam. In her eye, Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. On the other end, a familiar voice answered. "It's me," she said simply. "I need your help." And just like that, Evelyn Carter, the quiet farmer from Willow Creek, was stepping back into a world she thought she'd left behind. The phone call was short but meaningful. Evelyn didn't waste time with pleasantries. She got straight to the point, explaining what had happened and asking for assistance. On the other end of the line was an old friend, a former colleague, from her days in Delta Force. Though they hadn't spoken in years, their bond ran deep. They were more than co-workers. They were comrades who had faced life-and-death situations together. When Evelyn asked for help, there was no hesitation. Her friend promised to send someone she could trust. By mid-morning, a black SUV pulled up to Evelyn's farm. Out stepped a man in his late 40s, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket. He looked like any ordinary visitor, but Evelyn recognized him immediately. It was one of the best operatives she'd ever worked with, someone known for his resourcefulness and discretion. "Long time no see," he said with a grin as Evelyn approached. His voice carried warmth, though his eyes scanned the area carefully, taking in every detail. "Not long enough," Evelyn replied dryly, though a hint of a smile played on her lips. "Thanks for coming." They shook hands briefly before heading inside. Over coffee, Evelyn filled him in on everything: the break-in, the intruders, and her suspicions that this wasn't just a random act. As she spoke, her guest listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "This smells like organized crime," he said finally. "Small-time crooks don't operate like this unless someone bigger is pulling the strings." "That's what I figured," Evelyn agreed. "But I need proof, and I need to know how far this goes." Her friend nodded again. "Leave it to me. I'll get some people on it." "But Evelyn," he paused, looking at her seriously. "Are you sure you want to do this? You've built a good life here. Do you really want to stir up trouble?" Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. "Trouble found me first," she said firmly. "And if I don't deal with it now, it'll keep coming back, not just for me, for everyone around here." Her determination didn't surprise him. He'd seen it countless times before, both in combat zones and during covert missions. Once Evelyn set her mind to something, nothing could stop her. Still, he felt compelled to remind her of the risks. "This isn't going to be easy. If these guys are connected to a larger network, they won't go down quietly." "I didn't expect them to," Evelyn replied. "But I didn't survive all those years in the field by backing down either." Satisfied with her resolve, her friend gave her a small device, a compact tracking beacon. "Plant this on one of the men in your barn," he instructed. "We'll use it to track their movements once you let them go. That should give us a lead on who's behind this." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Let them go?" she echoed skeptically. After everything they did? It's better this way, he explained. If we hold on to them, it'll tip off whoever sent them. Letting them think they escaped will make them careless and give us the advantage. Though reluctant, Evelyn understood the logic. She trusted her friend's judgment even if it meant swallowing her pride. After thanking him, she walked him to his car. Before leaving, he turned to her one last time. "Stay sharp, Evelyn," he said. "And remember, you're not alone in this." With that he drove off, leaving Evelyn to prepare for the next step. She returned to the barn, where the 5 men were still tied up and sulking. Their bravado from the night before had vanished, replaced by fear and resentment. Seeing her approach, one of them muttered bitterly, "You can't keep us here forever." "Oh, I'm not planning to," Evelyn replied calmly. She knelt beside the leader and held up the tiny tracker. "Here's how this is going to work. You're free to leave whenever you want. But if you try anything stupid or if anyone else comes near my property, I'll make sure you regret it." The man glared at her but said nothing. Evelyn slipped the tracker into his pocket unnoticed, then untied him and his accomplices. True to her word, she let them walk away, watching silently as they disappeared down the dirt road leading away from her farm. Once they were gone, Evelyn exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. The hardest part was over. For now, she knew the real challenge lay ahead. Whoever was behind this attack wouldn't take kindly to failure, and they might retaliate. But Evelyn was ready. She always was. Over the next few days, she kept herself busy tending to her crops and animals, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Neighbors stopped by occasionally, curious about the broken fence post and stray tire tracks near her driveway. Evelyn brushed off their concerns with vague explanations, assuring them everything was fine. Inside, however, she remained vigilant, keeping a close eye on the tracker's signal. It didn't take long for activity to pick up. The tracker showed the men traveling to a nearby town where they rendezvoused with others. From there, they moved to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Evelyn shared the intel with her contact, who began piecing together the puzzle. Bit by bit, they uncovered evidence of a sprawling criminal network operating under the radar. This group specialized in targeting rural areas, exploiting farmers and landowners who lacked the resources to defend themselves. As the investigation progressed, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that this was personal. These criminals weren't just after money or supplies, they were testing her. Someone out there knew who she was and wanted to see how she'd respond. The realization fueled her determination. She refused to let them win. One evening, as the Izamer sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn stood on her porch gazing out at her fields. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of freshly turned soil. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future free from threats, a quiet life uninterrupted by violence or betrayal. But deep down, she knew that peace came at a price. And if protecting her home meant stepping back into the shadows, so be it. With renewed purpose, Evelyn headed inside to review the latest updates from her contact. Each clue brought her closer to uncovering the truth. And when the time came, she would strike, not out of anger or revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. Because sometimes justice required more than patience, sometimes it demanded action. The days that followed were a blur of activity for Evelyn. Though she appeared calm and composed on the surface, her mind was racing nonstop. Every piece of information her contact sent her added another layer to the puzzle. She spent hours poring over maps, tracking the movements of the men she had let go, and analyzing patterns in their behavior. It wasn't just about catching them, it was about understanding who they worked for and why they had targeted her. Her contact had uncovered disturbing details about the criminal network. They weren't just small-time thugs looking for quick cash. This was a well-organized operation with ties to illegal trafficking, stolen goods, and even corruption within local law enforcement. The more Evelyn learned, the clearer it became that this group preyed on vulnerable communities, people like her neighbors in Willow Creek. That realization made her blood boil. These criminals saw rural areas as easy targets, places where no one would fight back. But they hadn't counted. on crossing paths with someone like Evelyn. One afternoon, while tending to her chickens, Evelyn received an urgent message from her contact. "They're planning something big," he warned. "You need to be careful." Evelyn frowned, leaning against the fence as she listened intently. "What kind of big are we talking about?" she asked. "It's hard to say for sure," he admitted. "But based on the intel, it looks like they're gearing up for a major shipment. Could be weapons, drugs, or something else entirely. Whatever it is, it's happening soon." Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Time was running out. If she didn't act quickly, innocent people could get hurt. She couldn't sit back and wait for someone else to step in, not when she had the skills and resources to make a difference. "I'll handle it," she said firmly. There was no hesitation in her voice, only resolve. Her contact hesitated before responding. "Evelyn, you're not alone in this. Let me send backup." "No," she replied without missing a beat. "This is my fight. Besides, if too many outsiders get involved, they'll catch wind of it. We can't risk tipping them off." Reluctantly, her friend agreed. He trusted Evelyn's instincts, but that didn't stop him from worrying. Still, he promised to stay in touch, providing support from afar. That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by notes and photographs. She spread out a map of the area, marking key locations. The abandoned warehouse where the criminals had gathered, potential escape routes, and weak points in their security. Her plan began to take shape, piece by piece. She knew she couldn't take them down alone, not completely, but she could gather enough evidence to bring the entire operation crashing down. The next morning, Evelyn drove into town under the pretense of buying supplies. In reality, she was gathering intelligence. She stopped by the local diner, chatting casually with neighbors and keeping an ear out for gossip. Farmers talked about strange vehicles spotted late at night near the edge of town. Others mentioned rumors of stolen equipment turning up in distant counties. Each tidbit confirmed what Evelyn already suspected. The criminals were getting bolder. She left the diner. Evelyn spotted one of the men who had broken into her house weeks earlier. He was loitering outside a gas station, smoking a cigarette and glancing nervously around. Evelyn slowed her truck, pretending to adjust her rear-view mirror as she observed him. His presence here wasn't a coincidence. He was scouting, gathering information, or maybe even watching her. Evelyn parked a block away and approached the gas station on foot, blending into the crowd. She kept her distance, studying the man carefully. He didn't seem to recognize her. His focus was elsewhere. After a few minutes, he tossed his cigarette onto the ground and climbed into a beat-up van parked nearby. Evelyn noted the license plate number before slipping back into her truck. Back at the farm, she cross-referenced the plate with records provided by her contact. Sure enough, the van belonged to a shell company linked to the criminal network. Evelyn smiled grimly. These guys were sloppy, leaving trails everywhere they went. All she had to do was follow the breadcrumbs. Over the next few days, Evelyn played cat and mouse with the criminals. She tracked their movements, documented their activities, and mapped out their routines. She stayed hidden, always one step ahead. At night, she reviewed footage from the cameras she'd installed around her property, ensuring her own safety while preparing for what lay ahead. Finally, the pieces fell into place. The criminals were planning a large-scale operation, a midnight exchange at the abandoned warehouse. Trucks would arrive carrying illicit goods, which would then be distributed to various buyers. It was risky, bold, and exactly the kind of opportunity Evelyn needed. She called her contact again, sharing everything she had gathered. Together, they devised a plan. Federal agents would surround the warehouse, ready to move in once Evelyn gave the signal. Her job was simple: infiltrate the meeting, confirm the details, and ensure the authorities had all the evidence they needed to shut the network down. The night of the operation arrived, and Evelyn prepared meticulously. She dressed in dark clothing, her movements deliberate and precise. Years of training kicked in, steadying her nerves and sharpening her focus. As she loaded a backpack with essentials, a flashlight, a knife, and a small recording device, she reminded herself why she was doing this. This wasn't just about revenge or proving a point. It was about protecting her community and standing up for those who couldn't protect themselves. Driving toward the warehouse, Evelyn felt a surge of adrenaline. The road was deserted, the only sounds coming from the hum of her engine and the crunch of gravel beneath her tires. She parked a safe distance away and continued on foot, sticking to the shadows. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and its doors slightly ajar. Inside, voices echoed faintly, muffled but urgent. Evelyn crept closer, her heart pounding in her chest. She paused at the entrance, listening carefully. The criminals were arguing about something. Timing, logistics, maybe both. Taking a deep breath, she slipped inside, staying low and out of sight. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. Stacks of crates filled with contraband, armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and a whiteboard covered in scribbled plans. Using her phone, Evelyn recorded everything. The faces, the voices, the layout of the room. She moved silently, avoiding detection, until she found what she was looking for: a ledger detailing transactions, names, and dates. It was the smoking gun they needed. Just as she finished documenting the scene, one of the guards turned in her direction. Evelyn froze, pressing herself against the wall. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then slowly, the guard looked away, resuming his patrol. Exhaling quietly, Evelyn retreated the way she came, slipping back into the night undetected. Once she was safely away, she sent the signal to her contact. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air as federal agents descended on the warehouse. Evelyn watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. Part of her wanted to stay and see the aftermath, to confront the criminals face to face, but she resisted the urge. This wasn't about glory. It was about justice. As dawn broke over the horizon, Evelyn returned to her farm. The fields stretched, out before her, bathed in golden light. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. The threat was gone, for now. And though she knew danger might find her again someday, she also knew she was ready. Because Evelyn Carter wasn't just a farmer, she was a protector, and she would always stand her ground. The raid on the warehouse was a success, or at least that's what the news reports claimed. Federal agents swooped in just as Evelyn had planned, catching the criminals red-handed. Crates of illegal goods were seized, trucks loaded with contraband were impounded, and dozens of suspects were arrested. The local sheriff held a press conference the next day, praising the anonymous tipster who had provided critical information leading to the bust. But Evelyn didn't watch the news or listen to the updates. She already knew how it would play out. The authorities would pat themselves on the back, reporters would spin dramatic headlines, and the public would feel safer for a while. Meanwhile, Evelyn stayed focused on her farm, keeping her head down and avoiding attention. That's how she preferred it. Still, the aftermath of the operation weighed heavily on her mind. While the warehouse raid dealt a significant blow to the criminal network, Evelyn wasn't naive enough to believe it was over. These kinds of organizations didn't crumble overnight. There would be loose ends, people still loyal to the cause, hidden assets waiting to resurface, and leaders plotting their next move from the shadows. If anything, taking them down completely would require even more effort. Her contact reached out later that evening. "Good work," he said simply. His tone was warm but cautious, as if he knew there was more to say. "Thanks," Evelyn replied, leaning against her kitchen counter. "But we both know this isn't finished." He hesitated before responding. "You're right. Some of the higher-ups got away. We've got teams working on tracking them down, but it's going to take time." Evelyn sighed, running a hand through her hair. She'd expected as much. Criminal networks like this one operated like Hydra heads. Cut one off and two more sprouted in its place. What worried her most was the possibility that they might retaliate. They now knew someone had infiltrated their ranks, and if they figured out who, Evelyn's quiet life could become anything but peaceful. "I'll keep an eye out," she told him firmly. "If they come sniffing around here again, I'll handle it." Her contact didn't argue. He trusted Evelyn's instincts just as he always had. Still, he urged her to stay vigilant. "We're not leaving you hanging," he assured her. "I've got people monitoring the area. Just Promise me you won't try to take them on alone." Evelyn chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it. "Don't worry, I'm not looking for trouble. Trouble seems to find me anyway." The days that followed passed quietly, almost too quietly. Neighbors stopped by occasionally, congratulating Evelyn on her bravery after hearing rumors about the break-in weeks earlier. She deflected their praise with vague smiles and shrugged responses, letting them believe she'd simply called the police and left it at that. They didn't need to know the truth. And honestly, she doubted they'd believe her if she told them. But beneath the surface calm, Evelyn remained alert. She checked her cameras regularly, scanned the perimeter of her property, and kept her phone close at all times. Every sound outside made her pause. Every unfamiliar vehicle passing by drew her attention. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing, something bigger than before. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, she noticed a car parked along the dirt road leading to her farm. It wasn't unusual for strangers to pass through Willow Creek, but this vehicle stood out. It was sleek, expensive-looking, and clearly out of place among the tractors and pickup trucks common in the area. Evelyn squinted, trying to make out the driver, but the windows were tinted too darkly to see inside. Her instincts screamed at her to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, she walked casually toward the road, pretending to check her mailbox. As she approached, the car's engine roared to life, and it sped off in a cloud of dust. Evelyn watched it disappear, her jaw tightening. Whoever it was hadn't intended to stick around, but they had been watching. That night, Evelyn reviewed the footage from her security cameras. Sure enough, the car had circled her property several times before parking briefly near the edge of her land. She zoomed in on the license plate, but it was obscured, a deliberate attempt to avoid detection. Evelyn clenched her fists, frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. These people weren't giving up. In fact, they were getting bolder. Determined to stay ahead of them, Evelyn doubled down on her efforts. She spent hours analyzing every scrap of evidence she'd gathered during the warehouse raid. Documents, photos, recordings, all of it was meticulously organized and cross-referenced. Slowly but surely, patterns began to emerge. Connections between key players, locations used for storage or meetings, and even potential weak points in their operations became clearer. Her contact sent additional resources to help. Disguised as delivery drivers or maintenance workers, undercover operatives blended into the community, gathering intelligence without drawing suspicion. Together, they pieced together a broader picture of the network's reach. It extended far beyond Willow Creek, spanning multiple counties and involving corrupt officials, shady businesses, and even rival gangs. Evelyn realized that dismantling the entire operation would require more than just arrests. It needed exposure, public humiliation that would destroy their reputation and cut off their sources of power. But exposing them came with risks. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous it became. Every step forward felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between justice and self-preservation. Despite the danger, Evelyn refused to back down. This wasn't just about protecting herself anymore. It was about sending a message that no matter how powerful or well-connected these criminals thought they were, they couldn't operate unchecked. And if they wanted to mess with Willow Creek, they'd have to go through her first. One afternoon, while tending to her garden, Evelyn received another call from her contact. His voice was tense, urgent. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "They're planning retaliation. Against you?" Evelyn froze, her hand hovering above a patch of soil. "What kind of retaliation?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "They're recruiting locals," he explained. "People who owe them favors or are desperate for money. They're spreading lies about you, saying you're the reason their business got shut down, trying to turn the town against you." Evelyn closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. She should have seen this coming. Divide and conquer. It was a classic tactic. By turning her neighbors against her, the criminals hoped to isolate her, making her easier to target. But Evelyn had faced worse odds before. She wasn't about to let fear dictate her actions. "What do you suggest?" she asked calmly. Her contact hesitated. We can send backup, reinforcements, whatever you need. No, Evelyn replied firmly. Not yet. Let me talk to the townsfolk first. If they hear the truth from me, maybe I can stop this before it escalates. It was a risky move, but Evelyn believed in the people of Willow Creek. Most of them were good, honest folks who cared about their community. If she could show them the evidence, if she could prove what was really happening, they'd stand with her. At least, that's what she hoped. That evening, Evelyn attended a community meeting at the local church. Dozens of residents had gathered to discuss recent events, including rumors about her involvement in the warehouse raid. When Evelyn stepped up to speak, the room fell silent. For a moment, she locked eyes with familiar faces. Young mothers, elderly farmers, shopkeepers, all waiting to hear what she had to say. I know some of you have heard things about me, she began, her voice steady and clear. Things that aren't true. So tonight I'm going to tell you the truth about what happened at my farm, about the people targeting our town, and about why we need to stand together, to protect each other. As she spoke, Evelyn laid out the facts plainly, showing photos and documents that proved the existence of the criminal network. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't try to soften the blow. Instead, she appealed to their sense of justice, reminding them of the values that made Willow Creek special. By the time she finished speaking, the mood in the room had shifted. Doubts gave way to determination. Questions turned into offers of support. One by one, her neighbors vowed to help however they could, whether it was reporting suspicious activity or volunteering to patrol the streets. When Evelyn returned home that night, she felt a flicker of hope. The battle wasn't over, but she wasn't fighting alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The days that followed the community meeting were filled with a mix of tension and resolve. Evelyn could feel the shift in Willow Creek, a quiet but palpable unity forming among her neighbors. People who had once kept to themselves were now sharing information, keeping watch over each other's properties, and organizing informal patrols. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The criminals' attempts to divide them had backfired, turning what could have been fear into solidarity. Still, Evelyn knew better than to let her guard down. Just because the townsfolk were on her side didn't mean the threat had disappeared. If anything, the criminal network might see this as a challenge, an invitation to escalate their tactics. And Evelyn wasn't about to leave anything to chance. Her contact continued feeding her updates from behind the scenes. Federal agents were closing in on key members of the operation, but arrests were slow and methodical. Every lead had to be verified, every move calculated. Meanwhile, Evelyn worked tirelessly to ensure the people of Willow Creek stayed safe. She held training sessions for volunteers, teaching basic self-defense techniques and how to recognize suspicious behavior. She also distributed flyers listing emergency contacts and tips for reporting unusual activity. "You're making yourself pretty visible," her contact remarked during one of their calls. "Are you sure that's wise?" Evelyn paused, considering his words. "I don't have much choice," she admitted. "If I hide away or act like nothing's wrong, it'll make people nervous. They need to see me standing strong, not just for my sake, but for theirs." Her contact sighed but didn't argue. He trusted her judgment even if it meant putting herself in harm's way. "Just promise me you won't do anything reckless," he said finally. "We're almost there." Almost. There, but not quite. One evening, as Evelyn was locking up her barn, she noticed headlights approaching her driveway. At first, she assumed it was another neighbor checking in, but something about the vehicle's speed and erratic movement set off alarm bells. She ducked behind a stack of hay bales, watching as the car skidded to a stop near her house. 3 figures climbed out, their faces obscured by hoodies. They weren't here to talk. Evelyn reached for the bat she always kept nearby, gripping it tightly as she assessed the situation. These men weren't professionals. They were hired muscle, sent to intimidate or worse, but they had underestimated her before, and they were doing so again. As they spread out searching for her, Evelyn moved silently through the shadows. Years of combat training had taught her how to use her environment to her advantage. She waited, until two of them were close enough, then struck swiftly, disarming one and sending him sprawling to the ground. The third man lunged at her, but she sidestepped him easily, using his momentum against him. Within minutes, all three lay groaning on the dirt. Breathing heavily, Evelyn stood over them, her expression unreadable. "Tell whoever sent you this message," she said coldly. "If they want me, they can come themselves. Next time, I won't be so forgiving." She tied them up securely and called local authorities, letting them handle the cleanup. By morning, news of the attempted attack had spread throughout Willow Creek. Instead of fear, however, the incident sparked outrage. Neighbors rallied around Evelyn, vowing to protect her and their town from further threats. With the support of her community growing stronger by the day, Evelyn focused on delivering the final blow to the criminal network. Her contact arranged a meeting with federal investigators where she handed over everything she'd gathered: documents, recordings, maps, and detailed accounts of her encounters with the criminals. Together, they pieced together a comprehensive case that would dismantle the organization from top to bottom. The operation culminated in a series of coordinated raids across multiple counties. Dozens of arrests were made, including high-ranking leaders and corrupt officials. Stashes of illegal goods were seized, hidden bank accounts frozen, and connections exposed. For the first time in years, Willow Creek felt truly safe. But Evelyn didn't seek recognition for her role in bringing justice. When reporters came knocking, hoping to interview the mysterious woman behind the takedown, she politely declined. To them, she was just a farmer, someone who loved her land and her neighbors enough to stand up when it mattered most. In the weeks that followed, life in Willow Creek returned to its peaceful rhythm. Farmers tended their fields, children played in the streets, and laughter echoed through the town square. Evelyn went back to her routine, waking early to care for her animals and spending evenings on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Yet despite the calm, she remained vigilant, knowing that danger could resurface at any moment. One evening, as she sat sipping tea, her phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from her contact. "Mission accomplished. You did good." Evelyn smiled, faintly, setting the phone aside. For all the chaos she'd endured, for all the risks she'd taken, she couldn't imagine doing anything differently. Protecting her home, her community, and the values she believed in, it was worth every sacrifice. As she gazed out at her fields bathed in moonlight, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced darkness head-on and emerged victorious, not because she sought glory, but because it was the right thing to do. And though her past might forever shape her, it no longer defined her. Evelyn Carter was more than a soldier, more than a farmer. She was a protector, a beacon of strength in a world that often forgot the power of courage and compassion. And as long as she drew breath, she would continue to stand her ground, for herself, for her neighbors, and for the future she hoped to build. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, breaking the stillness of the night. Evelyn listened for a moment, then rose from her chair, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring.